They thought it was just a bomb acting up in church until it wouldn't stop barking. Not during the sermon, not during communion, and not even when the choir sang louder to drown him out. Rex stood stiff-legged in the center aisle of St. Luke's Baptist Church, growling so low it made the wooden pews vibrate. His eyes were locked on the tall crucifix behind the pulpit. He wasn't moving, wasn't blinking, wasn't barking to scare off an intruder or chase a squirrel. No, this was something else. Something deeper. Something nobody in that chapel wanted to acknowledge. The funeral service was supposed to be a peaceful goodbye for a beloved choir director. But within 10 minutes of stepping inside, the retired K-9 had turned the room into a war zone of confused whispers, side eyes, and embarrassment. Rex said, hissed Officer Rachel Langley, his handler, and only real friend since retirement. But Rex didn't move. He pressed forward, low ears, tight shoulders squared, as if pointing out a bomb that no one else could see. Pastor Glenn tried to play it off, laughing gently from the pulpit. "Looks like someone's spirit is a little too fired up this morning," he joked, chuckling as a few folks nervously followed suit. "Probably just smells the incense." But Rex wasn't distracted by the laughter or the smell of lilies or the sharp bite of cologne from the deacons. His body was tensed like a spring, every inch of him focused on that wooden cross. Rachel grabbed his leash. "Come on, buddy, that's enough." He didn't budge. And when she tugged harder, he let out a single sharp bark that made an old woman 3 pews back drop her tissue box. People began to murmur, "Is he trained? He's retired, isn't he? What's wrong with that cross?" 3 hours later, the church was empty again. The folding chairs had been packed away. The choir robes hung neatly behind the altar. A few leftover cookies sat sweating on a plastic tray in the fellowship hall. But Rachel stayed behind. So did Rex. He was sitting in the same exact spot in the aisle, eyes still trained on the crucifix, now silent but visibly alert. Every time she tried to lead him out, he pulled back like something tethered him there. Rachel sighed and sat in the pew closest to him. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. The church was dead quiet. No traffic outside, no humming air vents, just stillness. And that cross. She looked up at it. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, hand-carved, a little uneven if you really stared at the symmetry. The Christ figure was missing, probably removed during renovations. But the wood, it looked older than everything else in the building. Much older. Rachel had been with the sheriff's office for 15 years, mostly working missing persons. But after an incident, she didn't like talking about an ambush, a dead teen, and a case gone cold. She'd requested reassignment. Now she handled the department's retired K-9s, giving them peaceful homes to age out their final years. That peace apparently was not what Rex had in mind. The next morning, she returned to the church before sunrise. The janitor, an older man named Harold, let her in with a raised eyebrow. "Dog still got a bone to pick with Jesus," Rachel offered a dry smile, something like that. Rextail, already alert, pulled her back toward the altar the second they stepped inside. He wasn't barking this time, just pacing slowly, ears scanning, nose occasionally twitching, then locking again on the cross like it was pulsing with heat. She let go of the leash. He walked right to the front, stopped at the base of the cross, and started pawing at the floor. Rachel squatted down and ran her hand over the old tile. Her fingertips brushed over faint scratches, claw marks. From the night before, no, too deep, too straight, too old. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo. "Hey there, animal lovers. If stories like this keep you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more true-life tales of bravery, instinct, and the bond between humans and their four-legged guardians." Rachel paid a visit to the county archives that afternoon. St. Luke's Baptist had burned down in 1993 and was rebuilt almost entirely from scratch, except for a few salvaged items. She found the list: 1 stained glass window, 2 stone tablets, and an old wooden cross of disputed origin. Disputed origin. She stared at that phrase, circled it, and pulled the building's blueprints from a side drawer. The plans were clean, modern, standard floor joists, crawl spaces, wall depth, nothing unusual. But in the corner, someone had written in pencil, "cross cavity, do not touch." Rachel blinked. Cross cavity. She took the photo of the claw marks and compared it to the blueprint. The marks were directly beneath a section of flooring marked support plate, altar anchor. It didn't make sense, unless something had been hidden. That night, she sat in bed with Rex lying curled up near the foot. He wasn't sleeping. His ears twitched every few minutes. She stared at the locket she wore around her neck, a picture of her younger sister gone 23 years now. Missing, never found. Rachel had once believed in signs. Now she only believed in evidence. But Rex believed in something else. And whatever it was buried in that church. The next morning, Rachel came prepared. She carried a thermal scanner, a small chisel, and a portable floor mic she'd once used on cadaver recovery searches. She arrived at 6:04 a.m. before the maintenance staff. Rex walked calmly by her side until they reached the altar, then again began to growl. She scanned the floor behind the cross. A hollow echo. She scanned again, same result. The mic picked up a faint void beneath the concrete slab just 3 inches down. An air pocket. Rex began to whimper. Rachel looked up at the cross. Her breath caught. There, just above the base, was a carved symbol she hadn't noticed before. Not a Christian cross, not a Roman numeral. It looked wrong, like something primitive carved in haste and rage. Rex barked, then barked again. She knew that bark. It was the same bark he gave when he found something buried, when he found something dead. Rachel Langley had seen strange things during her years with the sheriff's office, ritual symbols in abandoned cabins, cryptic messages carved into trees. Even a man who claimed his missing wife had been taken by a ghost. But nothing had ever gotten under her skin, quite like that cross at St. Luke's. It wasn't the carving or the bark scratches or even the hollow sound beneath the floor. It was Rex. He wasn't a dog prone to drama, even in his prime with the canine unit. Rex had been the calmest in the field, never jumpy, never aggressive unless commanded. But now in retirement, the sudden fixation on that one piece of wood, it wasn't something she could ignore. And it was only getting worse. That night, back at home, Rex stood for 2 hours staring at the living room wall, tail rigid, eyes unblinking. Rachel had to physically move him to his bed where he curled up but didn't sleep. Not really. He whimpered like he was remembering something or warning someone. By morning, Rachel knew what she had to do. She wasn't about to jackhammer through a church floor without authorization, but she could start asking questions. First, stop the church's current pastor, Glenn Simmons. A tall man in his late 50s with a neat beard and a voice made for radio, Glenn had led the St. Luke's congregation for the past 14 years. Always friendly, always polished. But today, when Rachel mentioned the cross and Rex's behavior, his smile flickered. "Rachel," he said, lowering his voice, "I appreciate what you do with Rex, I really do. But this is a house of worship, not some kind of crime scene." "I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Pastor," she said evenly, "but the dog's reacting to something. And that cross, it's not even listed in the original rebuild plans." He folded his arms. "It's been part of this church longer than I have. Folks around here find comfort in it. But where did it come from?" A pause. "I've always been told it was recovered from the fire, even though the fire destroyed nearly everything else." He didn't answer. Rachel leaned in. "You said it brings people comfort, but what if it's hiding something that shouldn't be there?" Pastor Glenn's expression hardened. "I think you need to let this go, Officer Langley. Sometimes digging into the past just stirs up pain." But she wasn't about to stop. After church hours, Rachel paid a visit to the oldest living member of the congregation, Eloise Parker, 91 years old and sharp as a tack. Eloise had been sitting on her porch with a quilt draped over her knees, sipping iced tea from a mason jar when Rachel arrived. "You want to know about that cross?" Eloise asked, eyes narrowing. "Why now?" Rachel told her everything, the barking, the scan, the symbol. Eloise nodded slowly. "It wasn't always up there. Before the fire, we had a different one, smaller, prettier, came from Jerusalem, or so they said." "What happened to it?" "Burned like everything else. And this one," Eloise's voice dropped to a whisper, "came from the old chapel that used to sit on Hollow Creek Road. Place hasn't existed since the 40s. My daddy said it was cursed, said it was made from a lynching tree." Rachel blinked. "Excuse me." "They carved it from the same oak that hung 3 men in 1912. Said it was a way to redeem the wood, to make it holy again." Her eyes went cold. "But you can't pray evil away, child, not like that." Rachel drove straight to Hollow Creek. There was no chapel anymore, just a crumbled stone foundation in the middle of a patch of trees. But Rex jumped out of the truck like he just sniffed fire. He darted straight into the woods and stopped at a tree stump, sniffing and growling softly. Rachel stepped closer. The tree had been cut low, almost at the roots, but its size suggested it had been massive, old. She looked up at the sky, then back at Rex. "Is this where it came from?" Rex pawed the dirt and gave one low, steady bark. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet and the wind outside too loud. At 3:27 a.m., she heard a scratching noise, soft at first, then sharper. She ran downstairs. Rex was at the back door, growling at the porch like something or someone was out there. Rachel flipped on the floodlight. Nothing. She opened the door and stepped outside barefoot, holding her flashlight in one hand and her phone in the other. Still nothing, until she turned around and saw the scratches. 3 deep grooves carved into the wood just outside the door. Fresh. She dropped to her knees and examined them. Too high for Rex. Too deliberate for an animal. She stood quickly, locked the door, and leaned her back against it. What the hell is happening? The next day, Rachel met with someone she never thought she'd call again. Tom Granger, a retired forensic archaeologist who'd once worked with the FBI to uncover a mass burial site during a case in Tennessee. Tom lived off-grid now in a trailer near Lake Geneva. He opened the door shirtless, holding a cup of black coffee and squinting into the sun. "Rachel Langley," he muttered. "Didn't expect to hear from you. Thought you were done chasing ghosts." "I am," she said. "But my dog isn't." Over a campfire and 2 beers, she showed him the photos, the claw marks under the cross, the hollow sound from the mic scan, and the strange symbol. Tom leaned in. "That's not Christian." "No kidding. It's Norse? Pre-Christian. Some kind of protective rune, except it's inverted, which means it's meant to trap something and not keep it out." Rachel stared at him. What the hell would a Norse rune be doing on a Baptist crucifix in Alabama? Tom shrugged. "Wrong question. What's the right one? Who put it there?" Rachel drove straight to the church. She didn't knock. She walked in and went straight to the altar, where Rex immediately began barking again. She placed a hand on his back. "I know, buddy. I know." Then she pulled out her scanner. Again, the same reading hollow. Only this time she pulled out a small hammer and gently tapped the floor. Thunk, thunk, thud. The last one sounded different, like the echo dropped into something deeper. She looked up. The cross loomed over her. But now she could see it knew cracks in the base, as if the floor had shifted. Something was down there, and it was pushing back. Rachel didn't tell anyone she was coming back that night. She waited until the town was asleep, until the lights in Pastor Glenn's house across the road went out, and the chapel stood quiet under the moonlight like a tomb that hadn't been disturbed in years. But she wasn't alone. Rex rode in the front seat beside her, calm but alert. His ears flicked every time the tires crackled over gravel. The church had no alarm system, just a rusty deadbolt and a set of doors that stuck on humid nights. Rachel slid them open with a shoulder shove and a quiet prayer that she wasn't about to break the law in the name of truth. Or maybe she already had. The hammer, chisel, and portable light rigs she carried weren't for show. This wasn't a hunch anymore. It was a pattern of symbols buried space in a dog whose instincts were sharper than any human's gut. She didn't bother using the main light switch. Instead, she turned on her battery rig and swung the beam across the pews like a lighthouse searching for lost ships. Dust floated in the air, catching the light like ash. Rex moved ahead of her, slow and sure, until he reached the base of the crucifix again and sat down. Silent, watching. Rachel dropped to one knee and ran her fingers along the tile. She found the spot she'd marked before near the support plate, cold tight, subtly raised. She slipped on her gloves and started to dig. The first layer came up easy, just old grout and a few thin slabs. Beneath them, a concrete patch about 2 feet wide ran beneath the cross's footing. Rachel tapped it with the hammer, dull and solid on one side, hollow and soft on the other. She started on the softer end. The moment the chisel bit through, a foul, dry stench rolled up like something that had been buried too long beneath wet leaves and forgotten bones. Rachel gagged, pulled her shirt over her nose and pressed forward. Beneath the concrete, dirt, packed tight and dark, unnatural in color. And under the dirt, wood. A box. No, a panel. Rex growled low. Rachel brushed the dirt away, slowly exposing more of the wooden panel until she could see a full outline. A trap door about 3 feet wide, sealed with what looked like pitch and iron nails so old they had fused with the grain. She hesitated. The air down here was cold. Not basement cold, grave cold. But she had come this far. She pulled her crowbar from her pack and wedged it beneath the edge of the panel. The wood groaned, and then it opened. The smell hit her like a punch in the face. Not rot, not mildew, but something dry and strong, like the air inside had been dead for decades, waiting for release. Rachel dropped the flashlight down into the hole and saw a steep, narrow ladder leading into darkness. Wood-lined walls, reinforced edges. It wasn't just a crawl space. It was a chamber. She clipped a rope to her belt, dropped the other end around the base of the crucifix, and began her descent. Rex barking once before lying flat on the floor, unwilling to follow. "I'll be quick," she whispered. "Don't let anyone in." The chamber was about the size of a root cellar, 8 by 10 low-ceiling dirt floor. The flashlight beam flicked against something in the corner. A small bench, and next to it chains. Rachel crouched, heart racing. The chains were old, rusted, anchored to the wall with bolts as thick as her wrist. On the floor beside them, remnants of fabric, a single black shoe, and a tin locket caked in dirt. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. She wiped it clean, pried it open, and stopped breathing. Inside was a photo, grainy, water-stained, but clear enough. A girl, maybe 16, smiling. Rachel knew that face. Eliza May Garrison, the missing pastor's daughter. Vanished without a trace in 2004. Case closed with no leads. Just rumors about rebellion, pregnancy, or running off with a boy from across the tracks. But Rachel had always suspected something darker. And now here it was. She took photos of everything: the locket, the chains, the chamber walls. On the far side of the room, she spotted another symbol carved into the dirt-covered wall. Same inverted rune Tom Granger had identified. She traced her finger across it. It wasn't carved with precision, it was gouged, violently, over and over, like whoever made it wanted to seal something inside. A sound made her jump. Not above, below. A crackle, movement in the dirt. She turned and shined the light again. Nothing, but the temperature had dropped again. And the chain had moved. She climbed out fast, lungs burning, ears ringing. Rex was still there, tail tucked, eyes locked on the hole. Rachel dropped the panel back over the opening and retiled it as fast as she could with her gloved hands. Then she sat in the pew and stared at the crucifix. "You're not a cross," she whispered. "You're a lock." The next morning, she drove straight to the county records office. Eliza's case file had been cold for nearly 2 decades. Rachel had worked the investigation during her rookie years, chasing every tip, only to be told by her superior to let it go. She wasn't the first teenager to disappear, but she'd never let it go. The locket now sat in a sealed evidence bag on her passenger seat, Rex watching it like it might crawl away. At the office, Rachel requested building permits from 2004, the year after the church fire. She flipped through the documents until one caught her eye. Temporary structural support implemented beneath altar platform approved by County Inspector L. Harwick. Temporary. There was no mention of it in the final blueprints. Rachel tracked down the inspector, retired now, living in a cabin outside Jasper. He answered the door wearing a fishing vest and blinking behind thick glasses. "You remember doing a support install at St. Luke's in '04, she asked. "Yeah," he said slowly. "We were told to close off a subfloor cavity that had gone unused during rebuild. Dangerous footing." "Who told you that?" "Church board. Said the space gave folks the creeps." Didn't argue, I patched it, didn't ask questions. Rachel showed him a photo of the locket. His face went pale. "Where'd you find that?" "Same place you sealed up." He looked away. "I didn't know, I swear. I was just doing the job." By the end of the day, Rachel had made the call. She didn't go to the sheriff's office. Too many people there would want to contain the story. She went straight to the regional FBI field office in Birmingham. The agent assigned to cold cases, a woman named Dana Morales, listened in silence as Rachel laid out the story, the photos, the records. When she got to the part about the cross and the symbol, Morales raised an eyebrow. "That's a strange twist." "It's more than strange," Rachel said. "Someone locked that girl in a hidden chamber and buried her under a church." Morales nodded. "And you're saying the dog led you to it?" Rachel glanced down at Rex resting at her feet. "No," she said. "He wouldn't let me ignore it." That night, Rachel sat on her porch with Rex beside her. The stars were bright, the town was quiet. She held the locket in one hand and a beer in the other. 17 years, she whispered. "You were never lost. You were buried." Rex nudged her side gently. "Thanks, boy." He laid his head on her lap, eyes closed. But when the wind shifted and the porch light flickered, he lifted his head again and growled. By the time the sun came up, the FBI had sealed off St. Luke's Baptist Church. Crime scene tape ran across the front gates. Federal agents in dark windbreakers moved in and out with toolkits, cameras, and scanners. A mobile lab van idled in the parking lot, humming like a giant mechanical bee. Pastor Glenn stood outside, the yellow tape arms crossed tightly over his chest. His face was pale, but his mouth set firm. "I told you," he said to Rachel, voice low and tight. "I told you not to dig." Rachel didn't respond. She stood beside Rex, watching the agent's work. The cross had already been removed, cut away from the altar, and laid on the grass outside like a fallen totem. Without it, the chapel looked naked, wounded, exposed. Agent Dana Morales approached, holding an evidence bag. Inside was a weathered, leather-bound journal, half-burned, the cover singed at the corners. "We found it tucked behind the paneling in the chamber," Morales said. "Belongs to Eliza. Initials are inside the front cover." Rachel took the bag carefully. She kept a journal. Morales nodded. What's left of it? Some pages survived. It's not easy to read. Show me. They walked to the mobile lab where the pages had been gently flattened and scanned. Morales handed Rachel a few printouts. The entries were dated from late 2003 to early 2004. The handwriting was neat with little hearts drawn over the lowercase e's, but the content turned cold fast. He touched me again last night. Said if I told anyone I'd be punished. Mama doesn't believe me. Says I make things up. But I know I'm not crazy, I told Pastor Glenn. He told me to pray harder. They locked the basement again. I think something bad happened down there before. Rachel's stomach churned. She flipped through another page. He said he'd make me part of the foundation, that God would forgive him if I disappeared. She closed the file. Jesus. Morales nodded grimly. DNA from the remains matches Eliza. Cause of death appears to be asphyxiation and dehydration. There are signs she was restrained, possibly for days. Rachel turned to look out the van window. The crucifix lay there like a lie finally unearthed. News spread fast. By the next afternoon, half the town knew what had been found beneath the church. The local newspaper ran a front-page headline, "Missing girl found buried under St. Luke's." Local news stations parked vans outside the church gates. Reporters hounded congregants for statements. The community was in shock, but not for the reasons Rachel expected. Some people cried, some were angry, but others denied it. She ran away, one man told a camera crew. That cross has nothing to do with it. I don't believe that story for a second, a woman snapped on Facebook Live. The FBI's just stirring the pot. A retired deacon claimed the whole thing was a witch hunt. Rachel sat at her kitchen table that evening, scrolling through social media with one hand and petting Rex with the other. The comments weren't all kind. Fake story to bring down the church. She probably got herself killed. They're blaming God for what one man did. It made her skin crawl because she knew how silence worked, how it covered things up not with lies but with doubt, with maybes, with let it go, with don't dig. But the silence was breaking, and now the truth had a name. Eliza May Garrison. The following day, Pastor Glenn was brought in for questioning. He didn't resist. He sat across from Rachel and Agent Morales in a quiet interview room at the county building, fingers laced on the table, eyes downcast. "We know Eliza came to you," Morales said. "We have her journal. She says she told you everything." Glenn nodded slowly. "She did." Rachel stiffened. "And you did nothing?" "I was young," he said, voice shaking. 28. Just hired. I was told to keep order in the church. To avoid scandal. That family was influential. Eliza's father was a board member. "Who was she talking about?" Morales asked. Glenn hesitated. "Deacon Harold Jennings." Rachel's heart stopped. Harold. The church's maintenance man. The man who had let her in on her first visit. "He still works there," she said. Glenn nodded. "They never got rid of him. Too many people owed him favors. He was there the night Eliza vanished. Said she ran off. Said he saw her climb out the back window." "Did you believe him?" Glenn looked up with wet eyes. "I wanted to." Jennings was arrested that night. Rachel watched from the squad car as deputies cuffed the old man on his front lawn. He didn't fight, didn't yell, just stared at her with eyes so flat and empty they made her shiver. "Dog told you, didn't he?" he muttered. "Knew it all along." Rex growled quietly from the back seat. They took Jennings into custody, and within hours he'd lawyered up and refused to talk. But the evidence was stacking fast. DNA journal entries, the locket, even Glenn's testimony. It wouldn't bring Eliza back, but it would give her justice. That Sunday, Rachel returned to St. Luke's. The church was closed, boarded up. A sign out front read, "Services suspended until further notice." But she wasn't there for service. She brought flowers. Wild daisies, Eliza's favorite, according to an old yearbook entry she dug up in storage. She laid them in the grass where the cross had once stood. Rex sat beside her, quiet still. "You waited 17 years, Rachel whispered. "But you never stopped calling out." She looked down at Rex. "And you, thank you." Rex tilted his head slightly, ears flicking. Then he stood and walked toward the wall behind the altar. Again, Rachel followed, heart tightening. He sniffed, pawed the baseboard, whined. She knelt down, ran her hand along the edge, and found something she hadn't noticed before. Another mark, another rune, fainter this time, almost rubbed out. But there, beneath layers of paint. She stared at it. Was there another chamber? She pulled out her flashlight, angled it down, and saw a faint seam in the wall paneling, almost invisible. She pressed against it. The panel gave way. Behind it, a shallow recess. And inside, another locket. Dusty, closed. She opened it. Inside was a photo. Not Eliza. Another girl. Younger. Different smile. Different eyes. Rachel felt her knees go weak. Oh no, she breathed. This wasn't just about Eliza. She stepped back and looked around the chapel, heart pounding. How many more Rachel Langley stood frozen in the dim light of the church? The second locket sat open in her palm, its tiny hinges creaking with age. A girl's photo, young maybe 9 or 10. Freckles. A chipped tooth in her grin. Not Eliza, someone else. Rachel blinked twice, then reached for her phone. She snapped a picture of the photo and texted it to Agent Morales. Found another locket. Girl looks younger. Doesn't match Eliza. 3 dots appeared on the screen. Then can you bring it in? We'll run facial recognition. Good catch. Rachel looked back at Rex. He was still staring into the recessed tail-low ears perked forward. Then without prompting, he sniffed along the panel's edges and barked once. Not a warning bark. A confirmation. She stepped back and examined the wall more closely. A series of faint symbols, barely visible, even under flashlight, ran along the wood grain like someone had scratched them with a nail. Another inverted rune. Another hidden secret. Another girl. By the time Rachel got back to the county office, Agent Morales had already started running the image through missing persons databases. Rex rested near the elevator, but his eyes never closed. He kept watching the hallway like something might come around the corner at any second. Rachel sat beside him on the bench. She's not done talking, she whispered. Morales came out 10 minutes later holding a printout. Her face was grim. Got a match. Name's Abigail Abby Rosemont. Went missing in 1998. Last seen leaving youth choir practice at a church in Birmingham. Rachel took the sheet and studied the photo. Same girl, same chipped smile. But what chilled her was the location. Birmingham, she asked. Not here. Nope, Morales said. Different town, different church. But guess who the deacon was at that time? Rachel's throat tightened. Harold Jennings. They didn't sleep that night. Rachel and Morales sat in the evidence room mapping timelines, overlaying church rosters, cross-checking missing persons cases across southern Alabama from the late 80s to early 2000s. By dawn, they had 5 names, 5 girls, all connected by one thread: Harold Jennings. He'd worked in maintenance, youth programs, and logistics for multiple churches across the region, never staying longer than 5 years in any place. No one had connected the dots because no one had ever tried. The cases were considered unrelated, some marked as runaways, others just cold trails. Until now, Morales leaned back in her chair, exhausted. He used the churches as hunting grounds. Rachel nodded numb. And the crosses weren't symbols of salvation. They were locks, disguises, ritual, or camouflage. Bury them where no one would look, beneath the most sacred places. Morales looked at Rex, who was now sitting alert near the door. What about the dog? Rachel gave a tired smile. He's the only one who saw through it. That morning, Jennings finally spoke. Not to his attorney, not to the sheriff. To Rachel. She sat across from him in a secure holding cell, notepad on her lap, pen in hand, but no intention of writing anything down. I want to know why, she said. Jennings stared at her through the glass. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something else. Control pride. You ever hear silence that sings? He said, voice calm. I have. Rachel didn't blink. You're not insane. You're a coward. They were chosen. She felt her jaw clench. By who? Jennings leaned forward. By the walls. They speak if you listen. And the cross. You murdered children, she snapped. And you hid them in churches like trophies. He smiled, thin and cold. I didn't hide them. I offered them. Rachel stood up. Enjoy hell. As she walked away, Jennings laughed softly. I already have. The next day, demolition crews arrived at St. Luke's. Under federal order, the church would be deconstructed, beam by beam. Morales wanted every piece of wood, stone, and tile cataloged. If there were more hiding places, more bodies, she was going to find them. Rachel stood near the edge of the property, Rex by her side, as the heavy machinery rumbled into place. It's weird, Morales said, joining her, watching a church come down. Rachel nodded. It was never a church. Not really. They watched as the workers removed pews, pulled floorboards, peeled back layers of history. Beneath the altar, they uncovered another hidden space shallower than the last. Inside was a box. Inside the box, locks of hair, a silver ring, and a broken child's sandal. Another name added to the list. Another family waiting for closure. 3 weeks later, the story went national. Canine dog helps expose serial predator in southern churches. Faith and fear the man who used religion to hide murder. Dog's instinct leads to multiple victims under church altars. Rachel sat through 5 interviews, gave 3 statements to major outlets, and even turned down a book deal. She didn't want to profit off this. Neither did Rex. He just wanted quiet, peace. So Rachel filed retirement papers for herself and for him. They moved to a small cottage near the lake. No sirens, no case files, just birds, pine trees, and the sound of wind brushing the water. But even there, Rex would sometimes stop at the base of a tree, stare up and growl soft, uncertain. Rachel would kneel beside him and whisper, "It's okay, buddy. Nothing buried here." Still, she checked anyway. Every time. One evening, months later, Rachel received a package. No return address. Inside, a single page from a torn book. On it, a symbol, an inverted rune just like the one on the cross. Underneath it, coordinates. A GPS pin, somewhere in Georgia. Rachel stared at it for a long time. Then she walked to the living room, knelt beside Rex, and clipped his collar. "You ready?" His ears perked. He stood. They left before sunrise, because the walls weren't done speaking, and Rex still remembered how to listen. The dirt road that wound through the backwoods of northern Georgia was barely marked. Overgrown brush clawed at the sides of Rachel's truck as she drove slowly past the rusted gate the GPS had led her to. Beyond it, nothing but tall pine trees, a collapsed barn, and a mossy patch of earth that looked like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. Except Rex knew better. He'd been silent the whole ride, but the moment Rachel opened the truck door, he jumped out, sniffed the air, and locked onto something unseen. His body stiffened. He stared at the base of the old barn foundation, then let out one sharp bark. Rachel followed him, heart heavy. She carried a field shovel and a thermal scanner, now tools of instinct and regret. She no longer questioned these calls. If Rex said something was buried, it was. They reached the spot together. No markings, no cross, just silence. Rachel pressed the scanner to the ground. A hollow shape blinked back on the display. She didn't hesitate. She dug. 2 hours later, the shovel struck metal. Not a coffin, a trunk. Old, heavy, padlocked. She broke it open with the claw end of the shovel and lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in plastic and flannel, were tiny bones. And a name tag. Caroline Watts, age 6, missing since 1996. Rachel knelt in the dirt, breath caught in her throat. There were no words for moments like this. Only grief. Only reverence. Rex stood beside her and let out a soft whine. They stayed there until sunset. Until the light turned gold and the shadows stretched long across the field. The discovery made national headlines again. By now, Harold Jennings had been indicted on 6 counts of murder with 3 more pending. All were confirmed through remains artifacts or journal entries, all hidden beneath altars, inside walls, or beneath properties tied to small rural churches. Rachel testified at the trial, so did Agent Morales. The case, people said, was airtight. But Rachel didn't care about the trial. What mattered was that the girls had names again. Gravestones, not just empty file folders and forgotten filing cabinets. Rex was honored at a public ceremony hosted by the FBI and the Department of Justice. They called him a hero with a nose for the unspeakable. They gave him a medal. They gave Rachel a plaque. But the only thing Rex wanted was his blanket and a quiet spot under the porch. By that winter, his walks had slowed. His eyes grew a little cloudy. His joints ached even with the meds. Rachel cooked for him every night. Chicken, rice, and vegetables, whatever he wanted. She knew his time was coming. But she refused to rush it. One night, just after Christmas, the wind picked up outside. Snow hadn't started yet, but the cold was biting. Rachel lit a fire in the hearth, poured herself a cup of tea, and sat beside Rex's bed with a fleece blanket in her lap. He lay curled up, breathing softly, his nose twitching now and then, as if chasing something only he could smell. Rachel reached down and touched his ear. "You did good, buddy." He opened his eyes and looked up at her just once. Then he laid his head down again, and didn't lift it. The funeral was small, just Rachel, Agent Morales, and a few local officers who had once worked with Rex during his prime. They buried him beneath a tall pine on Rachel's property beside a carved stone that read, "Rex, 2013 to 2025. He heard what others wouldn't and listened until they were found." Rachel placed a folded flag on top, then added a worn locket Eliza's. It belonged there now. Part of the story, part of the silence finally broken. A month later, Rachel received a letter from one of the victims' families. Inside was a photo of a little girl holding a microphone, smiling shyly at a church talent show. On the back it read, "She loved to sing. Thank you for finding her." Rachel didn't cry often anymore, but that day she did. Time passed. The old churches were demolished or repurposed. A national task force formed to re-examine church-affiliated cold cases. A bill was introduced in Congress, the Rex Act, to provide federal funding for retired K-9 units to assist with missing persons investigations. Rachel went back to teaching basic K-9 training courses part-time, but mostly she stayed home. Sometimes she'd wake up at night and swear she'd still hear scratching at the baseboard, or a bark echoing in the trees. But when she got up and opened the door, it was just wind and memory. One spring morning, Rachel was working in the garden when her new pup, a floppy-eared rescue she named Shadow, came bounding around the corner with something in his mouth. She reached out to grab it. A torn scrap of wood, weathered, with a symbol carved into it. An inverted rune. Rachel stood up slowly and looked toward the distant woods. Not again, she whispered. Shadow barked, just once. Thank you for following Rex's journey with us. If this story moved you, we hope you'll take a moment to reflect on the powerful bond between animals and humans and the ways they help us uncover truth even when it's buried deep. What would you have done if your dog kept barking at something no one else could see? Would you have listened? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more true stories of courage, connection, and justice.